The History of Scotland, Part 4. Medieval Scotland and the Wars of Independence, 1000 to 1500. By the year 1000, Scotland was no longer just a patchwork of tribes. The Kingdom of Alba, forged by Kenneth MacAlpin and his descendants, had grown into a medieval state. Castles dotted the hills, abbeys rose from fertile valleys, and kings ruled from seats of stone at Scone, Dunfermline, and Edinburgh. But this was also an age of turmoil, of assassinations, shifting loyalties, dynastic struggles, and wars of independence that defined Scotland's destiny. Early medieval kings, Macbeth, 1040 to 1057. Far from Shakespeare's tyrant, the real Macbeth MacFinlaich was a capable and legitimate king. He came to the throne in 1040 after defeating King Duncan I at the Battle of Buthnagowan near Elgin. Macbeth ruled for 17 years, a long and stable reign for the time. He strengthened royal authority, governed effectively, and even made a pilgrimage to Rome in 1050, where he is said to have given alms to the poor. In 1057, Macbeth was defeated by Duncan's son, Malcolm Canmore, Malcolm III, with English support. Macbeth's death was later dramatised by Shakespeare, who twisted him into a villainous usurper, but history remembers him as a competent monarch. David I, 1124 to 1153, the Builder King. David I, youngest son of Malcolm III and Margaret of Wessex, transformed Scotland into a European-style medieval kingdom. David introduced Norman-style feudalism, granting lands to knights from England and France, who built castles and established burghs, towns. David founded towns such as Edinburgh, Perth, Stirling and Aberdeen as centres of trade and royal power. He established monasteries including Melrose, Holyrood and Kelso, which became centres of learning, agriculture and piety. His reign is sometimes called the Davidian Revolution, marking Scotland's transition from a Celtic kingdom to a feudal European state. The Crisis of Succession, 1286. For nearly 2 centuries after David, Scotland grew in power. Kings like Alexander II and Alexander III consolidated the realm, bringing the Western Isles under Scottish control after the Battle of Largs, 1263, against the Norse. But tragedy struck in 1286 when Alexander III fell to his death from a horse near Kinghorn, leaving no surviving heir except his infant granddaughter, Margaret, the Maid of Norway. Margaret was declared queen, but she died in Orkney in 1290, only 7 years old, before reaching Scotland. Her death plunged Scotland into a succession crisis, with over a dozen claimants vying for the throne. Edward I and the Great Cause. The Scottish nobles asked Edward I of England to arbitrate. Edward, known as the Hammer of the Scots, demanded recognition as Scotland's overlord. He selected John Balliol as king in 1292, but treated him as a puppet. Humiliated, Balliol rebelled, allying with France. Edward invaded, sacked Berwick in 1296, massacring thousands, and stripped Balliol of his crown. Scotland was under English occupation. The Wars of Independence, William Wallace, the Guardian of Scotland. In 1297, a knight of lesser nobility, William Wallace, rose in revolt. His most famous victory came at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, 1297. Outnumbered, Wallace and Andrew Murray lured the English onto a narrow wooden bridge across the River Forth. When the English knights charged, the Scots cut them down, collapsing the bridge and slaughtering the trapped soldiers. Wallace was declared Guardian of Scotland, ruling in the absent king's name, but his success was short-lived. At Falkirk, 1298, Edward's longbowmen decimated the Scottish schiltrons, pike formations. Wallace fled, later betrayed near Glasgow in 1305. He was executed in London, hanged, drawn and quartered. His limbs were displayed across Britain, a brutal warning. Yet Wallace became a martyr. His name inspired generations of Scots, and today he is honoured as a symbol of freedom. Robert the Bruce, king and warrior. After Wallace, Scotland needed a king. The crown fell to Robert the Bruce, a noble with both Scottish and Anglo-Norman heritage. 1306, Bruce stabbed his rival John Comyn in a church in Dumfries, then seized the crown. Branded a murderer, he was excommunicated by the Pope, hunted by Edward I, and forced into hiding. The Guerrilla War. Bruce fought a brutal guerrilla campaign, striking quickly then vanishing into forests and hills. His followers, including his brothers and wife, suffered imprisonment and death. 1314. The Battle of Bannockburn, Bruce's defining moment. Edward II marched north with a huge army to relieve Stirling Castle. Outnumbered, Bruce's men used the marshy ground to their advantage. In a 2-day battle, the Scots routed the English, securing Scotland's independence for a generation. The Declaration of Arbroath, 1320. In 1320, the Scottish nobles sent a letter to Pope John XXII, now known as the Declaration of Arbroath. It declared Scotland's right to freedom, stating, "It is not for glory, nor riches, nor honours we fight, but for freedom alone, which no good man gives up but with his life." The declaration argued that the king served the people, not the other way around. A radical idea, centuries ahead of its time. The later struggles. 1328. The Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton formally recognised Scotland's independence, with Robert the Bruce as king. 1329. Bruce died, leaving his son David II, only 5 years old, to rule. 1332 to 1357. The Second War of Independence began when Edward Balliol, with English support, invaded. David II was captured and imprisoned in England for 11 years, but eventually returned. By the mid-14th century, Scotland had endured and survived. Legacy of the Wars of Independence. By 1400, Scotland was an independent kingdom. Castles like Edinburgh, Stirling and Dunnottar stood as symbols of resilience. Abbeys flourished despite repeated wars, and the memory of Wallace and Bruce lived on in songs, legends and chronicles. Medieval Scotland was a land of warriors and saints, kings and rebels, a land where loyalty was often tested, but freedom was fiercely defended. From the reign of Macbeth to the triumph of Bruce, from abbeys and burghs to battlefields soaked in blood, medieval Scotland carved its identity in stone and sacrifice. In this age of castles and kings, the Scots proved that even against the mightiest kings of England, their spirit could not be broken. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to see the next part of our history of Scotland, please like and subscribe. And, as usual, stay curious.